Have you ever wondered why those two gas stations across the street always seem to get stuck in a price war that just tanks profits for both of them? Or, on a bigger scale, how entire countries can get locked into these insane arms races that nobody actually wants? Well, these things aren't just accidents, they're traps. And they're built from a really strange paradox right at the heart of human logic. Today, we're going to dive deep into that paradox, the prisoner's dilemma. So this is the big question, right? We all like to think of ourselves as rational people, making smart choices to improve our own lives. So why is it that all of our individual smart choices so often add up to a result that's terrible for everyone? It just feels like it shouldn't work that way. But it does. And it's a trap. The key to really understanding this trap, this paradox of self-interest, comes from a famous thought experiment from the world of game theory. And I'm telling you, once you get this concept, you're going to start seeing it absolutely everywhere. And that concept is, of course, the prisoner's dilemma. It's a really simple story on the surface, but its implications are just massive, shaping our world in all these ways that we barely even notice. So let's break down exactly how this whole dilemma works. To really get our heads around it, we have to look at the classic setup. So think of this next part as just learning the rules to a very simple but incredibly important game. All right, so the story goes like this. Two partners in crime get arrested. The police immediately separate them, putting them into different interrogation rooms. Crucially, they cannot talk to each other. Then a prosecutor goes to each one and offers them the exact same deal, forcing them to make a choice. Do you cooperate with your partner and stay silent, or do you defect and confess? Probably ratting them out. And this brilliant little matrix shows every possible outcome. Now remember, the numbers are years in prison, so the lower the number, the better for you. If both of you cooperate and stay silent, you both get just 1 year. That's the reward. If you both defect and confess, you both get 5 years. That's the punishment. But if one of you defects while the other stays silent, the defector walks free. 0 years. That's the temptation. While the silent one gets slapped with the maximum sentence, a full 10 years. And that is the dreaded sucker's payoff. You know, this simple little inequality right here is the secret engine that drives the entire dilemma. The payoff for temptation has to be better than the reward you get for cooperating. And that reward has to be better than the punishment for both of you failing. And even that punishment has to be better than being the only sucker. This specific order, TRPS, isn't just a detail. It is the literal formula that creates the trap. So how does this cold, hard logic actually play out in a prisoner's mind? Well, this is where we get to see how two perfectly rational people can walk themselves straight into a bad outcome. And that outcome has a name, the Nash Equilibrium. But to understand that, we first need to define what a dominant strategy is. It's simply the move that gives you the best personal result, no matter what the other person decides to do. It's always your safest individual bet. And in the prisoner's dilemma, here's the kicker. Defecting, confessing, is the dominant strategy. Just think it through from your perspective. Let's say your partner stays silent. Well, your best move is to defect, right? You get to walk free. Now, what if your partner defects? Your best move is still to defect, so you only get 5 years instead of 10. See, no matter what they do, you are personally better off if you choose to defect. And this leads us to the concept named after the brilliant mathematician John Nash. A Nash equilibrium is a stable state. It's a point where, once everyone's made their choice, no single person can improve their own situation by changing their mind alone. You are locked in. And this is the heart of the whole conflict. The Nash equilibrium, where both prisoners defect and get 5 years, is a stable outcome. Nobody wants to change their mind. But it's clearly not the best outcome. The best collective outcome, what economists call Pareto efficient, is mutual cooperation. That's the 1-year sentence. It's the optimal result for the group, but it's dangerously unstable because that individual temptation to defect is just so powerful. Okay, so this is a really fascinating thought experiment. But the reason it's so important is that this isn't just some abstract game. This simple little matrix is actually the hidden blueprint for some of the biggest strategic challenges in the real world. And we're going to start with one of the most terrifying. Yeah, the nuclear arms race between the US and the Soviet Union, that was a terrifying global-scale prisoner's dilemma. The choice wasn't about confessing, of course. It was about whether to build more nuclear weapons. Look at this matrix. It's the same logic. The best outcome for the entire world was mutual disarmament, cooperation. But for each nation, the temptation to arm while the other disarmed was huge. I mean, it meant a massive strategic advantage. And the fear, the absolute fear of being the sucker who disarmed while the other side kept building, that was catastrophic. So the only rational, dominant strategy for both sides was to keep arming, locking them into a ridiculously costly and dangerous arms race. And guess what? The exact same logic applies in business every single day. Two competing companies would make the most money together by cooperating to keep their prices high. But that temptation for one to defect, to slash prices and steal the entire market, it's immense. And because they're afraid of being the sucker left with high prices, what happens? They both cut their prices, triggering a price war where everybody makes less money. Now, imagine this whole dilemma, but with not two players, but thousands or millions. This is what's called an N-person dilemma, and it's the model for the famous tragedy of the commons. Think of a shared pasture. Every farmer thinks, hey, what's the harm if I just add one more cow? For them, individually, it's a rational choice. But when every single farmer does it, the pasture gets destroyed and all the cows starve. That is the exact same logic behind overfishing, deforestation, and even global climate change. I know, this all sounds pretty bleak. But here's the good news. We are not doomed to just endlessly repeat this cycle of failure. We can actually escape the trap, but it requires us to consciously change the rules of the game itself. So what's the most powerful tool we have for escaping the dilemma? It's playing the game more than once. When you know you're going to have to deal with the other person again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, it creates what game theorists call the shadow of the future. And all of a sudden, your reputation for being cooperative starts to really, really matter. In fact, researchers ran these computer tournaments to find the best strategy for this repeated game. And a super simple strategy won. It's called tit for tat. It's brilliant. You start by being nice. You cooperate on the first move. If the other player ever defects, you immediately punish them by defecting on the very next turn. But, and this is crucial, the moment they go back to cooperating, you forgive them instantly and cooperate too. It's nice, it's retaliatory, and it's forgiving. So how do we build this kind of thinking into our actual societies? Well, we basically do it in three main ways. First, we change the payoffs. We use laws, taxes, and fines to make defection more expensive. Second, we create assurance. We use treaties and monitoring systems so people aren't so afraid of being the sucker. And third, we build systems that rely on long-term relationships and reputation, which makes cooperation the best long-run strategy for everyone. And that right there is the most important takeaway. We don't build successful societies by just hoping everyone will suddenly become selfless and altruistic. We do it by being smart game designers. We strategically re-engineer the rules in our laws, in our businesses, in our international relations to make cooperation the most logical, self-interested, and rational choice for everyone involved. And so that leaves us with one final question. For you, because this isn't just about geopolitics or big economics. Take a look around at your own life, your team at work, your friendships, your community. What games are you stuck in where maybe everyone is losing? And now that you know the rules, how can you be the one to change them?